So pages 34 to 40 of your grammar packet are going to review some of the present tense irregular verbs and go over some of those newer rules that we don't really know and haven't practiced with yet. AR and ER stem changing verbs can only change two ways. They can change from E to IE, or they can change from O to UE. AR and ER stem changing verbs will never change from E to I in the present tense, and there are no exceptions to that. The vowel closest to the AR, ER, or IR ending will be the vowel that will make the stem change. So this chart in your notes shows you some of the more common E to IE stem changing verbs and their meanings. You'll notice that there are two of them that are starred, and we'll talk about why those are starred a little later. This chart has your common O to UE stem changing verbs and their English meanings. The verb hugar gets grouped into this because of the U to UE, and it's the only one who does that, so it doesn't have its own special category. And again, here you'll notice that two verbs have a star, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. So the verbs that were starred in the two charts are elar, nevar, llover, tronar, and these are called impersonal verbs. They are only going to be conjugated in the third person singular, the usted LNAF form. And if you think about it, all of these deal with weather. To freeze, to snow, to rain, and to thunder. So for all of them, we use it. I don't snow, you don't snow, they don't rain. So these verbs can only be used with it does something, which is why they're impersonal. They aren't ever used with a subject pronoun, like yo or to. Hugar, as I said before, is going to get grouped in with our O to UE stem changing verbs because it's the only verb that's going to change from U to UE. So they just put it with O to UE instead of creating a separate category. The verb oler is going to change from O to HUE in all forms except the nosotros. And they do this more for pronunciation and division of syllables than anything else. Co-star is a verb that can only be conjugated in the third person singular and the third person plural. It costs or they cost. So we don't want to conjugate it in the yo form or the to form or the nosotros form. So IR verbs that are stem changing verbs can change three different ways. They can change E to IE, O to UE, or they can change E to I. So this chart gives you some of the more common IR verbs that change from E to IE, as well as their English meanings. So this chart shows you some of your common IR verbs that change from E to I, and it also gives you their English meanings. So verbs ending in UIR, not GUIR, add Y after the U and before the ending in all forms except the nosotros. For example, the verb construir in the present tense gets conjugated as construyo, construyes, construye, construimos, construís, construyen. So this chart in your notes has some verbs that are conjugated just like construir, and it also has their English meanings. We also have verbs that end in IAR and UAR. So some verbs that end in IAR or UAR will stress the I or the U in all forms except the nosotros in the present tense. These verbs will have a conjugated form listed in glossaries and dictionaries so that you're aware that this is going to be the case. So for example, the verb guiar, in the dictionary or in a glossary in parentheses, you would see it guió, So you would know that you would need an accent mark. And an example of a UAR verb that would do this would be continuar, and it would be listed as continuó in a glossary or a dictionary. So these are some common verbs that are going to follow the same rules as guiar, and it also has their English meanings. This chart has two verbs that change like continuar and their English meanings as well. Another group of verbs are verbs that end in GER or GIR. And the rule for these verbs is that you change the G to J before O and A. An example of this would be the verb escoger, and you would conjugate escoger, escojo, escoges, escoge, escogemos, escojáis, escogen. Notice that my yo form, the G, changed to a J. So all of the verbs in this chart are going to do the same thing and change the same way that escoger did. And it has next to them their English meanings. So then we also have verbs like seguir that end in GUIR. So for verbs that end in GUIR, the GU changes to a G in the yo form of the present tense. For example, the verb distinguir will conjugate to distingo, distingues, distingue, distinguimos, distinguís, distinguen. So notice that in the yo form, I just have a G. I do not have a GU. So there are also verbs that end in CER or CIR, like conocer and conducir. So a CER or CIR verb that will change from C to ZC if a vowel comes before the C. These verbs will change C to Z if a consonant comes before the C. And this change will only happen in the yo form. For example, the verb conocer in the yo form becomes conozco. The C changes to a ZC because in the original verb, I have a vowel before the C of the CER ending. The rest of the forms are regular. So if we look at the verb torcer, this has a consonant before the C in the CER ending. So in this case, my C changes to a Z. So my yo form would be tuerzo. Now, with these verbs, they can also have a stem changer, like in this case, OUE. So here's a list of verbs that will change like conocer. They'll add the ZC. And they also have their English definitions next to them. The verbs mecer, which mean to rock, and cocer, which is another way to say to cook, are not going to follow this rule. There are going to be exceptions to it. So with these two verbs, the C is going to change to a Z in the yo form. Here are a few verbs that are also going to change like torcer, and they're just going to have C to Z in the yo form. We also have a group of verbs that are UCIR. So verbs that end in UCIR are also going to change from C to ZC in the yo form and are going to be regular in their other forms. The table has a list of these verbs. They do follow the rule in the present tense. They're just a separate group because in the preterite tense, they're going to be a little bit different. So they try to keep these groups separated as you go through. So we also have verbs that have the yo-go form, and some common yo-go verbs are caer, hacer, poner, salir, traer, and valer. So with these verbs, if you add a prefix to any of them, the new verb is also going to be a yo-go verb. So the prefix does not negate the yo-go change. An example of how this prefix works is the list of verbs in this chart. They all change like poner for good reason. If you look at these verbs, they all have poner as their base verb, and then they have a prefix that gets added to it to create a new verb. These verbs are all going to change like traer, and remember that the yo form of traer is trigo, so it's Traigo. And again, these all have traer as the base verb, and then they have a prefix added to it to create a new verb. So we also have verbs that can be stem-changing verbs. They change E to IE, E to I, or O to UE, and they're also yo-go verbs. For example, the verb decir, the yo form is digo, and then dices, dice, decimos, decís, dicen. So we have an E to I and a yo-go. Oír is another verb that gets grouped here. The conjugated forms of oír are oigo, oyes, oye, oímos, oís, oyen. Tener is a yo-go, and it's an E to IE stem changing verb. So if you look at the forms, you can see that it has that double change. Venir is also a yo-go and an E to IE stem changing verb. So it has one form in the yo form, and then it has the E to IE change. So these verbs are all going to make the same change as tener. And again, if you look at these, tener is the main verb, and then a prefix is added. So anytime a prefix gets added to a verb, you still have to keep any kind of spelling change or yo-go change in that new verb. And then we have some verbs that just have an irregular yo form. Some of them just have the yo form that's irregular, and others of them carry that yo form, that irregularity through. And these don't really fit into any of the other categories or other rules. So for example, the yo form of ear is voy, dar is doy, ver is veo, saber is say with the accent, and it changes meaning without the accent, so that's an important one. Caber is kepo, ser is soy, and estar is estoy.